I don't have a model. I don't have power ratings. So much of what I do is just like from feel and intuition and a lot of experience booking and betting.
Welcome to another episode of the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host, and on this episode, I'm thrilled to have Chris Bennett on the show. He is the Director of Risk at Circa Sports Book. Among other topics, we talk about how he excelled as a sports bettor before moving on to be a bookmaker at Circa. He talks in detail about how he books the NFL in terms of spreads and totals. And finally, we look at the spread and total in the 4 NFL divisional playoff games. The Football Analytics Show is brought to you by the Power Rank Sports Betting Newsletter. This is a free service that strives to be 3 things. 1, valuable. 2, concise. 3, entertaining. In this newsletter, I write about NFL bets that I have made. Also, every Saturday, I send out a curated list of sports betting tips and news. If you sign up, I'll also send you my top 5 sports betting podcast episodes, an education through your ears. To get this free service, go to thepowerrank.com. That is my site for better sports betting information through data and analytics. Once again, that's thepowerrank.com. Joining me on this episode of the podcast is Chris Bennett. He is the Director of Risk at Circa Sports Book. And while he helps with every sport, he is primarily responsible for the NFL and MLB markets there. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ed. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Chris, we'd love to know more about your story. How did you get into the sports betting world and bookmaking in particular?
So when I was younger and I was going through high school and college, I never really had a career plan. I didn't know what I was going to do after graduating college. I took subjects in school that I enjoyed, tended to be good at math and science. In fact, I started out as a chemistry major in college because that was my favorite subject in high school. And then once I was taking all of those chemistry classes in college, I discovered I was not going to be a chemist. Did not enjoy the classes as they got more difficult, the long hours in the lab, writing up the lab reports after the fact. But I did really like math and kept pursuing that, ended up getting a double major. All the while, I've liked sports my whole life and played sports and was a huge fan of the Minnesota teams growing up. But I also liked the analytical side of sports. Loved filling out the bracket for March Madness, playing fantasy football. There were some daily fantasy games on ESPN.com for baseball and NBA that I really enjoyed playing. And during college, I put some money in an offshore sportsbook account, was betting some baseball parlays, really enjoyed that process. Didn't make any money, lost everything that I put into that account. But
Right. Yeah.
I discovered there was, 2 things I really liked, sports and math, and didn't have a career plan, but I knew I wanted to combine those 2 things in some way. So I guess I must have had a sense that I wanted to have a job that I was passionate about and that I really enjoyed. And I really didn't give a lot of thought to, what kind of career is going to make a lot of money and give you a lot of good benefits and give you all the federal holidays off and any of that. I had no sense of that whatsoever. And it's kind of interesting to me to look at any young people who have that sort of a plan in their early 20s, because I certainly didn't have it. And I'd grown up in Minnesota, went to school in Illinois, had never been to Nevada, which was the one state in the United States that had, these special rules allowing sports betting, unlike any other. So I really didn't know what that environment looked like with sports betting. But I just had this sense that if I wanted to do something with math and sports, it had to be like somewhere in the sports betting industry. So after I graduated college, I was kind of sick of going to school. I had no interest in pursuing a graduate program at that time. And I was like, I think I just need to go to Las Vegas and like figure this out. Never having been there. And I moved back in with my parents after I graduated college, and I was home for a few months, not doing much of anything, didn't go get a job. And they didn't exactly push me out the door, but like I knew I needed to like get on with my life and do something. And I like talked about going to Las Vegas, and I hadn't made formal plans. And then I finally did. And it was the fall of 2004 that I basically packed up my stuff and drove from Minnesota to Las Vegas. And I was like, I'll figure it out when I get there. And got here and just applied for entry-level jobs at the sports books. I was like, I got to get a job. I got to be able to, pay my own way and just survive at the outset here. And then we'll see where things go. So that's kind of how it all started, just working as a ticket writer. It was at the time called the Las Vegas Hilton. It underwent a name change a few years later to the LVH, and now it's the Westgate.
Right. So I love your story about being back at school and being a chemistry major. I kind of had a similar track. Like I actually like chemistry, and I think I wanted to major in that. And I liked the classes, but I just could not stand the labs, like all those hours, all those chemicals, all that stuff. Right. So that kind of pushed me more into like the math track as well. Right. When I left school, but like I feel like that's kind of similar to what you were doing, right? I mean, it sounds like you ended up getting a double major anyway.
I did, yeah, and I was already taking some math classes as part of the chemistry curriculum, so I didn't have to like overextend myself really to get that double major and to finish in 4 years. And again, like those math classes, especially the higher level ones, were just more interesting and fun to me than the higher level chemistry courses.
Yeah, exactly. So Chris, you get to Las Vegas, you're working at what is now the Westgate. What happens after that?
So when I'm at the Hilton, I'm just like doing this very simple entry level job. Did not need a major in math for doing this job. It's pretty simple. You don't really need a high school education. You just need to be able to count money accurately more than anything. But I was now in this environment where I'm at a sports book. This sports book is actually doing, interesting things as far as making their own numbers on a lot of markets, offering very fair odds and very, what I consider fair, bet amounts that they'll give anybody on a given market. And that was primarily driven by our manager, Ed Sammons, and assistant manager, Jeff Sherman. And at the time, he was a supervisor, Matt Metcalf, who is now our sportsbook director at Circa Sports. Like these guys were all good with odds making and bookmaking. And so when I'm there writing tickets, like I'm not able to really learn a lot directly, but I let it be known that, I'm passionate about the odds making and bookmaking, and I want to move up if opportunities arise. So did the ticket writing for a few months. An opportunity opened up in our back office, doing a lot of administrative things. And that was a good stepping stone because now I wasn't customer facing, and like I just had the time in that back office where I could talk about things with Ed and Jeff and Matt and really start to learn how this all works. And after some time as an admin, I got promoted to a supervisor. And that's when I actually had responsibilities with bookmaking and odds making. And, some of it was like things I kind of just discovered on my own, but a lot of it was learning directly from those guys. And I had no idea when I first accepted the job that I would be so lucky to be in that position, to be working at a sports book where the managers like were actually like doing something fun and interesting and were really skilled and talented in this industry. And that's not true of every sports book in Nevada, especially, all the satellite sports books where nobody there has any responsibility or expertise for making the odds or booking the games. It's done out of some centralized hub location. So you have to be in that environment, like where those decisions are being made, to really learn anything. And at the time, and still for the state of Nevada, the Hilton/Westgate was an independent operator. So all the stuff, all the markets that were being offered, all the decisions that were being made, it was all coming from that one place. And I was in that environment. And that's really where so much of my development came from.
Excellent. Was there some kind of luck in accepting the job at Westgate? Like, did you have other offers that you may have accepted and would have been one of these satellite sports books that might have kind of put you back a couple months at least?
Funny you should ask that, because it had been about 5 weeks in Las Vegas before I got an offer. And the offer from the Hilton was the first one I got. And I accepted it. And later that day, I got a phone call with a job offer from a satellite sports book of another operator. And if the order had been reversed, I don't know, maybe my life would be a lot different now than it's turned out.
Yep.
So yeah, probably a good thing that I got that offer from an operator where, they were actually doing the stuff that I wanted to do.
Yeah, that's incredible. All right, so you're at the Westgate, or what is now known as the Westgate. You move into the back room. What is the first market that they give you responsibility over?
I remember one time it was like a Saturday afternoon, and they put me in the chair, and it was college football going on, and I was going to put up a halftime line, and I want to say Notre Dame was playing, and Ed was standing next to me, and he's like, "Just put up a line." I'm like, "What? I've never done this before. What are you talking about? I don't know what to make it. This is a big responsibility. People are going to bet a lot of money on this." And we have our odds screen where you can see what the lines are at other sports books. And at that point, I knew enough that if I could look at the screen and see the other sports books made Notre Dame -1, that I don't just put out Notre Dame -7 for the second half line. I wasn't clueless, but at the same time, I was I remember being kind of nervous. I'm like, I don't want to screw this up.
Yeah, of course.
And then we also had this thing where we had this big room where a lot of people would watch the games, and be a packed house on a Saturday for college football. And we would make announcements over the loudspeaker to tell people the second half line was up. Now, this was before mobile apps. Every bet had to be placed at the counter, and half times only last 15 minutes. So, it's very time sensitive getting any bets in on such a market. So yes, we display what the second half line is on our boards in the sports book, but also we're announcing it to everyone. And I remember at first I used to be nervous to make the announcement of what the line was. So that's something that sticks with me, doing those college football halftimes early on. I think, getting responsibility more broadly, it was probably baseball related, because that was the sport that I just understood the best for whatever reason, and had the most knowledge and skill with. And at some point, I don't know how long I had been, a supervisor and had responsibility for various bookmaking aspects, but at some point, Ed gave me the World Series winner market, and that was a big responsibility. And that's what I do now at Circa, is I manage the odds for the World Series, and it's one of my favorite markets to manage. And something that kind of is a daily process, especially in a sport where the teams are playing pretty much every single day. So you can't fall asleep on this market. You can't just, take a trip to Europe for a week during the season and not pay attention to what's going on, because you're going to end up offering a number that you probably shouldn't be offering based on, what's happening in the standings and player injuries and all that. So I was very suited for that sort of thing, because it gave me this structure and this daily task of keeping up with the standings and just, having an opinion on each team's chances of winning everything. And looking back now, whatever my process was back then, it's probably gotten a million times better now. And I kind of wonder, were there some things I I did poorly with that, where Ed maybe didn't say anything just because he didn't want me to lose confidence in how I was doing it.
Right.
Not that we ever got like killed on the World Series winner or anything but like that, but that I'm sure was one of the first markets that I had like real responsibility for.
Well, I mean, if you didn't get killed in those markets, that's a good sign that you're at least on the right track.
Well, that's rule number one of bookmaking: don't get killed.
Right.
So yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I would know we got killed if I got fired or something for how we did in a given market, and that didn't happen. So
excellent.
Could have been that bad.
Excellent. Were there any stops for you between the Westgate and now your position at Circa?
Well, within the sportsbook industry, no, but just for life, yes. I had worked at the Hilton it had been like 8 years, and I was kind of unhappy with some things. And I had become fairly successful with my own betting.
Nice.
I could make a bet at any other sports book in the state of Nevada, other than the sports book I worked at. So there were opportunities out there, and I spent quite a bit of time looking for them and just developing as a bettor, where I was able to identify good bets. I was making money. I looked at my options just for, what kind of life I wanted, and I could do better just betting for myself than what the Hilton was willing to pay me.
For sure.
And I would have way more freedom, as a person just betting on sports. Like you work when you want to work, and like eventually got to the point where I just didn't see much of a career path staying at the Hilton.
Right.
And Ed and Jeff weren't going to leave anytime soon, so I wasn't going to be able to get promoted beyond where I was at. And I finally decided that I was going to leave and just bet on sports, full time. And
nice.
Something I discovered in that process was I wasn't very suited to kind of spending so much time by myself in front of a computer screen, looking at the market and trying to be available for any opportunities that arose with, lines going up for a given market and being ready to bet into them, or, betting half times, or just like whenever the games were going on, being available when I thought there might be a good bet to place. And for years, my mom, who works in financial services, had kind of proposed to any of her 3 children that they come work with her. And she had become very successful in her career as a financial advisor. And so I was kind of, debating what to do, because I wasn't really happy just betting sports full time. Like I was making enough money to support myself, but I kind of looked at the opportunity that she had presented, and I was like, I might really regret it if I don't explore this. And so I told her, like, okay, I'll come and join you. And, you've said how great this is. So I'll stop doing the sports betting stuff, and I'll come, join your practice. And so that was in like the middle of 2014, and she's in Minneapolis. So I moved back to Minnesota, where I grew up. And this is the beginning of 2015 that I started working with her, and was actually doing that for about 4 years. And while I was doing that, I went and got my CFA charter. So like the analytical side of me that works so well with the sports betting, I applied to the financial markets as well, to like gain as much expertise as I could in that area. But, outside of all the things I learned and those accomplishments that I had, I also kind of realized that this wasn't really for me as a career. Like I didn't love it in the way that she loved it. I was still betting on sports the whole time that I was in Minnesota. Like that was the thing I was most excited about, was like, looking at the daily baseball lines and, other sports when it was convenient to do so. And another lucky thing that happened for me is while I'm in Minnesota, things are happening here in Las Vegas, where Derek Stevens owns a few casinos downtown, but he doesn't have his own sports book. Like within those casinos, they are leasing out space to another operator. But all along, he has these plans to have his own sports book, and it was just going to take a little bit longer for him to have his own sports book in his own casino and hotel. Mm-hmm. And in starting up a sports book, he needed to build a team. And it just so happened that Matt Metcalf, who I had worked with for many years at the Hilton, and we had become friends over that time, got the job as director of this new sportsbook entity, which would become Circa Sports. And, Matt, knowing me from years past and like my skills and abilities when it comes to bookmaking and odds making, reached out to me, number one, just to say, like, was I open to like leaving the career I was currently in and potentially becoming the sportsbook manager for Circa Sports, long before Circa Sports opened for business in June of 2019. So we had various conversations about what that could look like. I made a few trips out to Las Vegas and met Derek Stevens. And I knew all along, like, the sports betting industry, one way or another, whether I'm a bookmaker, an odds maker, a bettor, that's the area, the industry I'm most suited for. So I was hoping this would work out. And it eventually got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I accepted the position and kind of unwound the things that had been going on in Minneapolis so that I could come back here to Las Vegas a few months before we actually opened for business. So I'm in Minneapolis from early 2015 to early 2019. I come back to Las Vegas in the spring of 2019 and get to work a few months before we actually opened for business in June of 2019. And so that's where I've been now for 3.5 years.
Awesome. So when you were betting on sports, did you have partners, or was that mostly you alone?
A lot of it was independent. I had one other partner that I worked with on certain areas, but yeah, I was probably pretty unusual in being successful at this, but also doing so much of it independently. I'm not the type of person that is like really well connected, and there's, so many pathways to like have access to numbers to bet into, and that whole like bookmaking and sports betting underworld, I really did not have much connection to. So that limited me for sure. Like I'm just making most of my bets at the brick and mortar Las Vegas sports books. Like I spent so much time driving to the casinos, going into the sports book, like picking up the sheets of paper in the racks and like looking at the odds there and looking at the odds on the board. What I've told people is my success, like betting on sports back then before mobile apps, a lot of it was just like a scavenger hunt. It's not that because I'm so smart or anything. I just put in the work looking for stuff.
Right.
And so had to have a certain base level of knowledge, but still a lot of that was just, making the effort.
For sure. So that, like literally driving around to different books, finding the best number, betting it there, that sort of thing.
A lot of it was that, but I would say a bigger component for me was betting into markets that weren't on an odds screen. So going back to the era before mobile apps, and you wanted to know what the odds were on a golfer to win a tournament, you needed to go to the sports book to get that information. Right. So you had to just put the work in just to know what the number being offered was. So that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's inconvenient for the sports bettor, but for the person that's willing to make the effort, every year I would find a couple of things that were just obscenely good bets. And the reason I was able to bet them is because nobody found it before me. It wasn't convenient to find that number and make the bet. So when I thought about like, okay, how much money can I make betting on sports? I kind of figured like over the course of a calendar year, I'm going to find a couple of things that are just really, really good. Yeah, they might lose, but I'm probably going to hit something that's significant.
Absolutely. Well, what was your best sport when you were betting?
Baseball has always been my best sport. Like that's the one sport where I'll say that I can beat the market on baseball. Like I can bet into the money lines and over a large enough sample, I'm very confident I'm going to win. I don't have that same confidence in any other sport. When it comes to winning in other markets, I'm looking at things like props and futures and, just goofy things that are not like widely available to everyone at a given point in time. That's where I really did well, is again, going back to like, it's a scavenger hunt, just looking through as many things as you can look through. And if you can spot something that's mispriced, that's what, you're going to make your money on, or that's what I was going to make my money on. I was not going to make money because I was going to make a limit bet on an NFL side, on Friday afternoon for a Sunday game. That is not how I made money. And I probably wouldn't make money if I put all of my effort into that today, even. It's just really tough to beat. So, hitting teams on odds to win their division or the pennant or the World Series over the years has been a good thing. Markets like regular season wins, I have no problem tying up my money for 9 months and betting something at minus 110. I'm patient. I can wait. Would find good numbers on those markets over the years. And another component here is just like benefiting from the lack of skill from certain odds makers and bookmakers here in Nevada. Like, part of the landscape of this industry, I think, in the state of Nevada, and it's probably true in other parts of the world, and now the states that have recently had legalization here in America, is if you want to make a lot of money, like, working for a sports book typically isn't the way to do it, hasn't been the way to do it. And when you don't like pay for talent, what you're going to end up with is people, putting up odds that aren't very good, making bad decisions as far as bets to take and how to move a line. So that benefits the people that are betting. So I definitely benefited tremendously from that. Again, making money, not because I'm so smart, but just being able to like identify the weaknesses of others and did so well just finding that stuff.
That's awesome. So, Chris, you move on to Circa, and one of your responsibilities is the NFL market. Maybe take us through like a week during the NFL regular season, when you put up the spread and total, how you manage it, and maybe how numbers and analytics come into play in that process.
So what we've got with NFL and how that impacts me as the person that also is managing MLB is an overlap of seasons in August, September, and October. And that time of year is incredibly busy for me when you have both of those leagues being played at the same time. So I'm just going to focus more on my process for the back half of the NFL season.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And baseball is pretty much done, and I can really 100% focus in on NFL, because I really have to rely on my team to help me out a ton when it's still baseball season. So I'm not doing everything for NFL in September and October, because for me personally, I make baseball the number one priority. That's my favorite thing. That's where I'm going to be like the most opinionated and basically argue with either my coworkers or customers betting or the market in general on what the odds should be, for any of that. Whereas the NFL, I don't have nearly that same confidence level. Like, I am not going to war in the NFL like I might be willing to do in MLB, unless it involves a team like the Vikings, who I feel like I know exceptionally well, for better and for worse. But as far as the daily process, let's say we're in mid-season. It's Sunday. It's a very busy day in the office, booking all the games and the in games and the halftimes. And then we usually have a selection of props for the Sunday night game. So once that Sunday night game kicks off, like, I take a breath for a minute, and then I'm thinking about putting out the lines for the following week. So by this time, it's about 5:30 p.m. Pacific time, and there's already a market out there. We got our odds screen. We can see a few sports books have lines already on the following week's games. it's not even really feasible for me to have lines out that early because I'm, again, booking the Sunday night game and booking all the props. Like, I just can't manage that and the next week's NFL line simultaneously. And the book in Nevada that's been first for many, many years is the one I used to work at, the Westgate, putting out the next week's NFL lines, doing that update before those afternoon NFL games are even completed. So like, to me, that's exceptionally early to have a market out. So, all the credit in the world to Ed and Jeff and team for getting those numbers out there as early as they do. So I'm looking at their numbers. I'm looking at whatever other numbers are out there, because if I put up a number that's significantly different, I'm going to get a bet right away. Like, the NFL numbers are going to converge very quickly. Like, the middlers, the arbitrageurs, they're going to bet into your number if you're off by, a certain amount. So I know that if I'm putting up 4.5 when they're putting up 3.5, I'm going to get a bet plus 4.5. So I have to, make that decision. Is that what I want? Do I think, their number's too low? And I think, like, I'm happy to take a bet at plus 4.5 because I think later in the week it's going to go up, and plus 4.5 won't be a good bet. So I'm just going down the list of games, and I don't have like power ratings for every team next to me. I don't have like a raw number that I think a given matchup should be. I hope that I've picked up some information throughout the day on any key injuries that have happened, but I don't even have all of that information. Every week it happens where some important player, and it's usually not a skill position player, gets injured. And for whatever reason, like, I don't have that information at the time that I'm putting up the following week's lines. So that's a weakness from us as the bookmaker, not having that complete information. It's definitely valuable to have like the lines from the other sports books that have been up for just a little bit at least, and know that, the number's probably not horrifically bad, but it happens plenty of times that the number that's up all of Sunday evening ends up moving a ton just in the next day or two, because like nobody really seemed to know about a key injury. Like, just going back to this season, we had a specific situation where Jalen Hurts was injured in a game against the Bears, and he finished playing that game. So how did anybody know that he was really hurt and then wouldn't play the next week? Well, we found out, I don't know if it was the next day or 2 days later, but, came out that he was injured, and there was just a massive line move on the Eagles' next game. So, that's a thing you always have to be cognizant of as the bookmaker, that might have happened on that current day slate of games, that there's a significant injury, and this number you're putting out for the following week would be perfectly fine if there weren't any injuries like this, but it's the NFL and guys get injured all the time. So I guess I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but going back to the process of putting up the lines, it's that awareness, but also just having a feel for like, team A, is this much better than team B? Obviously, are they playing on the road or at home or neutral site or whatever? And just try to get out a side and total as soon as possible on Sunday evening, because it's the NFL. It's the most popular market, and you want to have those lines up as soon as you can for the public.
Absolutely. And then information and bets start coming in during the week. How do you move the spread and total at Circa based on that information?
So there's a couple really important components to booking the NFL. Number one, you've got a limits progression. So typically on Sunday evening, we're opening the limits for a game at like 5,000 on the side or 10,000. Depends if there's any really significant injury uncertainty in a given game. And we're going to get to a point where our limit on the side is 200,000. So we're always aware of that throughout the process, that, okay, we're taking a smaller bet early on and trying to figure out where this number is going to settle, where it's going to get to a point where we feel like we can get action on both sides. And that action is a net benefit for the sports book. The term a lot of people use is earning to it, the simple description would be if the line is 5.5 and you've got people laying -110 on both sides of -5.5 and +5.5. Well, that's obviously a good situation for the sports book because they're going to, hold more than they pay out if it's -110 on both sides, and like there's going to be a winning side and a losing side there. It gets a little more complicated when you're writing bets at different numbers, and that's just part of how booking football is because it's a point spread sport and the point spreads move around. So writing a bet at -6.5 -110 and +7.5 -110 is not necessarily a good thing for the sportsbook because of the frequency of the favorite winning by exactly 7 and the sportsbook losing both of those bets. So we're trying to move the point spread, when we take typically, a limit bet, or it doesn't have to be a full limit, it could be close to a limit bet on a given side, and deciding, okay, do I want to move the number here to try and find where sharp people are willing to bet the other side? And the term that I always use and try to emphasize to, younger guys on the team learning is you want to find resistance. As a bookmaker, you don't just want to take bets on one side. Like if you're just doing that, you're a gambler. You're not really a bookmaker. Right. So you want to find resistance. You want to find bets on both sides, but you also don't want to move the point spread any more than you absolutely have to. If I take a bet at -6.5, if I can get a bet at +7, I'd rather get that than at +7.5 for obvious reasons. So you're balancing this constantly with the point spread sports of, I want to find resistance. I want to find like where there's a good bet on the other side so I can really narrow the range of where this number is going to settle, but I don't want to go too far either. And I also have to be aware of, okay, these limits are going to be increasing as the week goes on. So I don't want to take, a few smaller bets and have moved maybe 2.5 points. And then all of a sudden our limits have gotten, 5 times larger than they were when we were taking those bets. And now we're taking a massive bet on the other side and we're just not in a good position as a result of that. The other component is you have to profile your customers well. A given person makes a limit bet and you have to make a decision on how much you're going to move based on like how much you respect that specific customer's bet. And that can be tricky because you don't know like the exact motivation necessarily for a given
right.
bet. Right. Like if someone bets something and then like you look for news and a certain player is ruled out of the game, well, you might be reasonably confident that that was the motivation for the bet. But other times, like you don't really know. So factored into the booking NFL, and it applies to every sport, is okay, what do we think of this customer? Do we think they're a long-term winner? What do we think of this very specific bet? Is this a bet that we want to get on the same side of? And by that, I mean get bets on the other side so that we win if the customer wins. Is there already bets on the other side from customers that we really respect? So we wanted this bet and we want, more money on that side. You've got to constantly be evaluating, the customer specifically, the motivations for the individual bets so that you can try to position the sportsbook so whatever side you're going to win to when the game actually starts, and that's usually how it plays out, that you don't win to both sides, that you're comfortable with that position.
Right. Absolutely. So it sounds, Chris, like you're trying to get to quote unquote the right price. And you've talked about all the different aspects of that right price, right? You're not getting resistance, so on and so forth. But that's different from wanting equal money on both sides of a spread, correct? Because that's kind of the common conventional wisdom that, the sports books just want equal money on both sides. Yeah,
that's what I'd say the average person who doesn't really understand how this business works tends to think that, sports books, they put up a number, they move it around to try to get balanced action. When the game actually starts, they're going to win on either side because of the juice. When in practice, that is not how it works at all. Even if that was your goal, the only way you could really achieve that is by having really low limits. Because like I said, if we're taking 200,000 on an NFL game, someone could just bet 200,000 before a few minutes before the game starts, and it's going to throw you out of whack if you had it perfectly balanced. And like, it'd be impossible to get it back to balance in a couple of minutes before the game starts if you take that bet. So to even achieve it, you've made your limits very, very low. And in doing that, you've decreased your potential win, and certainly like decreased your long-term win in doing that. What happens in reality on most games is the sportsbook has a side that it will lose money to and a side that it will win money to. And in the point spread sports, often at least one number that if the favorite wins by exactly that many points is going to be bad for the sportsbook, because some of the bets will have won and some of the bets will have been a push from the public, and the sportsbook never likes when that happens. So there is that added downside possibility when it comes to football in terms of the outcomes. But like, you're doing a bad job as a bookmaker if your goal is to have balanced action, because you want to like encourage betting, and it's just going to be natural that there's going to be more money on one side than another, but you want to, get on the side that you believe is like the better side to be on. And in some games, you're going to have like sharp opinions on both sides, and you as the bookmaker aren't really going to take a position. You're going to say, you know what, they're taking 3 and they're laying 2.5. So the number's 2 3/4. So I'm happy to write money, on both sides of this game and hope it doesn't land 3. Right. Other games, you'll be like, wow, they're just happy to take all the +7 they can get. And it's all public money laying 6.5. So, we don't want it to land 7, but all the sharp guys are on +7. So we're just going to have ourselves positioned so we make money if the dog covers this game. Right. So every game, it's a unique evolution and how you get to that end point of, okay, here's what we need. Here's how much money we can win on this outcome. Here's how much money we can lose on this outcome. And the thing that kind of speaks more generally to bookmaking, anything that I try to emphasize is, as far as what we're trying to achieve, or what I believe you should be trying to achieve as a bookmaker, is you're not trying to get equal action on both sides. You're trying to, number one, encourage action. Can't make any money if nobody bets. And you're trying to make like that ratio of money that is what you consider to be, not sharp or good for the house, or however you want to think about it, as high as it can be of that recreational public money to the really sharp money, where like you're confident they're getting a good bet. Like if +7 -110 is a good bet, I don't really want to be offering that. I want to be offering 6.5 or less. So I want to be writing that money more at 6.5 than I do 7. So kind of marrying those two competing forces of, well, you need people to bet. So you got to put out a number that like entices them to bet. But at the same time, if it's a good bet, then like the book is going to lose long term. Right. So it's got to be the at the right number and right price for the sports book.
I mean, it sounds like you want to win as a sports book when your sharp customers win. That's the side you want to be on. Is that roughly correct?
Yeah, I would say that is a good kind of general, simple rule. Like, one thing that I think about a lot, and I look at how our customers are doing over a large sample size, and it's like, okay, this person is winning, like in a given sport or market. Like, I don't want the sportsbook to lose when they're winning. Like, this is a winning player. I want to get on the same side as them, because if they're winning, we're winning. Now, that's only true up to a certain point. If they're winning, betting, +7 on the point spread, I can't offer 3.5, because at some point you get down to a number that's far enough away from what they bet that it's no longer, good for the sportsbook to be taking the bet on the other side. So you got to keep that in mind as well. But, provided you don't need to make those really extreme moves away from a number that they bet, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to get on the same side as our winning players.
I've seen some pretty big like late movement in some games. I guess the question is, do you find that some of these bigger groups are waiting until the very end because you can make bigger bets then? The example I'm thinking of is the college football championship game where Georgia was 12.5 point favorite for a while, and then a couple hours before the game it goes to 14. Like, do you see that a lot with what you're booking in the NFL? And is that a strategy that's potentially a winning one for some of these bigger groups?
Yeah, this is really interesting, and like really for people who are immersed in sports betting and all the things that are going on. So people that are reasonably sophisticated with sports betting will probably look at the like football board, a day or two or even day of a game, and like every sports book has the same number. And oh man, this market, it's so hard to beat. It's impossible to beat. It's not. I don't ever want to feel like too complacent in a given number we're offering at a given point in time. Like the thing I tell people is everything is beatable, like in sports betting, because there is no like true factual mathematical probability for these things. It's humans playing a game. Lots of unpredictable things are going to happen in that game. Like the point spread, the total, money line, that's just like the overall market opinion at a given point in time, which usually is very good and very efficient, but it is beatable. And nobody's like coming in and betting, every single game on the board for like an NFL Sunday on Sunday morning for our limit and like cleaning up and hitting over 60% doing that. Right. But like there's still sophisticated people out there that can bet into like a market number that you want to think is very strong and can still, clear that hurdle rate of, 52.5% and win betting at minus 110 on the point spread. And, we've got a lot of really sharp customers at Circa. So we're getting these bets, and I know that our number is very much respected by other sports books, and they're very aware of where we're at on all the sports that are on the screen, or the American sports that are on the screen. Because if we move our number, especially once we've gone to like our highest limits, like you better respect that. Like we're making that move for a reason. And, people that are betting out there, some of them want to bet even more than what we're willing to take at a given point in time, or they want to get a better number than what Circa is offering. So, they're trying to strategize so that they can, get the best number they possibly can on a given side. Now, if we look specifically at the national championship between TCU and Georgia, there are definitely people out there that wanted to lay less than 2 touchdowns on Georgia. And we had opened, I think, at 14 on that game. 14 is a key number. They didn't want to lay 14. They wanted to lay less than 14. And that number did get lower than 14, and it was there for a long time. But the late money came in on Georgia, and I wasn't booking that game specifically, but I know we got to 14, and I think we actually went to 14 and a half for a brief period of time as well, because we had become convinced that the sharper money was on Georgia in that game. And, it's the national championship. That number was out there for like weeks. Like,
right. Yep.
Like you could have gotten a lot of money down on Georgia, laying the points less than 14. So there's just not that many people though that are like that good. Like it seems obvious after the game's been played, and oh yeah, they won by 58 points or whatever. But right. That's how we as humans like look at everything. Like the result, it's like, oh well, yeah, that makes perfect sense that it worked out that way, and this was the right side. Well, you can say that to yourself, but then just go forward to the next set of games, and you still have the same uncertainty that you always have going into a game.
Yep. Absolutely. Chris, you have a background in math. Do you use any of that when you are making this or managing this NFL market?
I think so much of like my skills with math are just kind of like in my head. I'm really not that sophisticated, and I should be way more sophisticated than I am as far as like using statistics and analytics. I don't have a model. I don't have power ratings. So much of what I do is just like from feel and intuition and a lot of experience booking and betting. And, you can't do anything to like make up for experience. You just have to like live it. And I'm in my 40s now, so I've gotten quite a bit of experience, and I'm probably in the prime years for like me being good at this kind of work. But if I went back to school and got better with just probably refresher courses in math and some more maybe advanced topics with statistics and doing things with computer modeling, I could be much better. But the areas where I'm strong with just having a good feel for things and knowing how to book, it's worth so much. And I don't know, like for somebody else to get to that level, like you just have to like be the bookmaker and the odds maker and be taking bets from a large audience to have those skills develop over time. I'm just generally good with numbers as far as probabilities. And I think about things in my head as far as, okay, this NFL team, they're looking like they're going to get this seed for the playoffs, which means they'd have to win like this set of matchups, and roughly their price to win the Super Bowl should be, 10-1 or whatever. Like I'm pretty good at that kind of thing in my head. But then all of this kind of ties into, as a bookmaker, like it's not that you have to get it exactly right when you set a number. It's how you react after you put that number out for betting. That's what's really important. So it's not like, oh man, I got to nail this opener on the NFL playoff games. Like I was coming up with a number for 49ers Cowboys, which is this weekend's NFC divisional round game. And I just knew in my head from like what the lines were for these teams' games leading up to this point. Like I knew my number wasn't way off, but if it wasn't absolutely perfect, if the number we opened with isn't the same number that we close with when the game kicks off, like doesn't really matter. What matters is all the decisions that we made from the time that we opened it for betting until they kick off, and what kind of, liability and win potential we have at that point. That's what really matters.
For sure. And that makes complete sense if you can only bet $5,000 into the opener, but $200,000 into the close, right? So, so what did you make that number, Dallas at San Francisco, when you started?
So, I was watching the Cowboys and Bucks, and Cowboys had a very good game. They outperformed the closing number on that game significantly, and didn't look like they had any significant injuries that would be carrying over to the 49er game. And I was thinking, I feel like they probably want to take anything higher than 3 on the Cowboys, but I don't want to put out 3 on this game if it's just going to lead to like an automatic bet on the 49ers, because it should be higher than 3. So my thought was this game is 3.25. And one thing we typically do with our openers at Circa Sports is we don't open a point spread with juice other than -110. So
right,
for me, like I had to kind of pick a side. I'm like, okay, it looks like I'll just have to, take the bet at +3.5 if that's what they want to do here. And like I didn't have a power rating I was looking at. I didn't have a simulation that I ran a bunch of times. Just like I knew pretty confidently the number is in a fairly narrow range. And it's mostly just in my head. Like the number comes to me, and I can't necessarily like explain it in any more sophisticated way than that. And I saw other books were 4.5, and I put up 3.5, and we got some money at 3.5, but not enough where we felt the need to move it. So
excellent.
Came out okay.
Do you believe in Brock Purdy after 6 games as a starter?
So the interesting thing about Brock Purdy, when Garoppolo got injured, and I think they were playing the Dolphins.
Yeah, that
The
sounds right.
49ers ended up winning that game and covering. And then, like, while this is all happening, our odds to win the Super Bowl are down. Like, we don't leave them up when a bunch of teams are playing on Sundays
That
during the
makes
regular
sense.
season. And we typically update them on Monday mornings because I'm frankly too exhausted to do it on Sunday night.
Right.
Monday morning, as I'm, assessing the landscape, because every week in the NFL season is very impactful for the odds to win the Super Bowl. I was thinking about the 49ers specifically because, this is a team that people really liked and were considered a Super Bowl contender. And now they lost their quarterback and they're going to turn to this guy that was the very last pick in the draft, which is usually not where a star quarterback is going to get drafted. And I was thinking about it. I'm like, well, this is the best situation for such a player to be in. Like, Shanahan is brilliant. Like, the offensive scheme that the 49ers run is probably better than any other scheme in the NFL. He's probably got the best defense supporting him. What reason do I have to believe that Brock Purdy is not good? I didn't have any. Like, I don't watch college football. I don't know how good he was in college. I know teams make mistakes in the draft all the time, so I don't just presume if you're drafted higher, you're going to be a better pro. That's been, proven over the years that the NFL draft is still a very imperfect science. And so I, came up with some numbers, and there's typically other books that have their Super Bowl odds, available before I make my update. And I looked, and I'm like, there's definitely some doubt for Brock Purdy out there. And I just kind of stuck to my guns, and I went probably, of all the books that offer really fair odds on the Super Bowl, I was probably the lowest on the 49ers. And the thing that we do for both the Super Bowl and the conference is we give people a price that they can bet on a team to win, but you can also bet against a team.
Right.
So that forces us to always offer fair prices because you can just bet the no option on almost any of these things unless it's really long odds. And what ended up happening was I put out my prices for 49ers Super Bowl and NFC, and we got money on the 49ers not to win the NFC. And the way things have played out since that time, well, the 49ers just keep on winning, end up getting the number 2 seed, and now here they are, at home, favored by more than a field goal in the divisional round. That has, to this point, worked out very well for us because the market price now on the 49ers is significantly shorter than it was after I had made that update with the Garoppolo injury.
Yeah. All right, Chris, got 3 other games. Jacksonville is going to Kansas City. Kansas City's off a bye. You have them right now as an 8.5 point favorite, the home team Chiefs. Where do you think this market might go, and what do you think about this game?
The side and total, unless there's some weather event going on in Kansas City, seemed pretty solid to me. We opened at 52 on the total, and it got bet up to 53. But to me, it's more than 51, less than 54, and point spread. I think more than 7, less than 10. I'd be surprised if it hit either of those numbers at either of those ranges on the side and total, because I don't think there's really any significant injury information that we're waiting on here. The Chiefs are interesting because they've shown the ability to just go out there and blitz teams and build a big lead, but they've also sometimes shown a tendency to give up a lead. And it can be kind of perplexing, like why that's happening. Go back to last year's AFC Championship, and at the end of the first half of that game, they were in position to bury the Bengals. And for them to not only not put them away, but to lose that game at home was kind of stunning. And look at the Jaguars, massive comeback against the Chargers, big comeback against the Ravens, big comeback against the Cowboys. Maybe we're going to have a similar game here. No one's going to argue that the Chiefs are clearly the better team, very capable of putting up a lot of points on this Jacksonville defense. But, just the way these teams have kind of behaved, especially the contrast from first half to second half, it wouldn't shock me if, you had something similar and Jacksonville made a game of it.
Excellent. All right, let's move on to the Sunday night game with the Giants at the Eagles in another divisional contest. And right now you have Eagles minus 7.5. The total is 48. It's interesting if we'll see if Jalen Hurts is 100% from that shoulder injury. What are you seeing in this game?
My thought was on the opener that they were going to want to take more than a touchdown with the Giants. So we opened 7. And then we got some sharp money on Eagles minus 7, which I can buy that because if Jalen Hurts is fine and they've got Lane Johnson back on the offensive line and the defense is mostly healthy, I think this is a great Eagles team, like very capable of winning the Super Bowl. In fact, if there's looking at what other books have out there on their Super Bowl odds, if like I had to make a bet, I'd probably bet on the Eagles because 5-1 or better seems pretty fair for what their chances are of winning it all. At the same time, I got a lot of respect for this Giants team, and I think they've got a decent defense. And Daniel Jones has played great. He's a weapon not only as a passer, but man, he's a good runner. And that's going to be very tough for the Eagles to deal with. I don't really care about the game earlier in the year where the Eagles clobbered the Giants in New York. I wouldn't put a lot of stock in that. I feel like the Giants offense has come together really well. And even though they don't have like big name receivers that, with Daniel Jones as the dual threat, that the Giants are very capable of winning this game, I think. And who knows, if they sack Hurts and he lands on the shoulder and aggravates something, I think everyone's aware of that possibility and that there might be some vulnerability there with the Eagles.
Excellent. All right. So last game that we haven't talked about, we have Cincinnati going to Buffalo. I would say that neither of these teams looked particularly good last week as the dogs covered in both cases. We have Buffalo as minus 4.5 at Circa Sports Book, total at 48.5. What are you seeing here?
The Bills are an interesting team because they're the highest power rated team in the league. They were favored at the Chiefs earlier this year. They were favored at the Bengals in that game that got postponed. At times, they definitely look like the best team in the NFL. And then there's just times where there's just there's missed connections, and it's kind of a head scratcher. Like, why did they struggle so much against the Dolphins in that playoff game? They had that game earlier in the year where they had like a 17-point lead against the Vikings and they ended up losing. And it just seems like they have these like issues from time to time, but they get priced for their upside when you look at, where the lines usually close when the games kick off. Josh Allen's got that elbow issue where you watch the games, I think he looks fine, but I don't know, maybe he's not 100%. With that elbow injury, he's a great runner. So that is tremendously valuable. We might have a very windy game in Buffalo on Sunday, and that is probably better for the Bills than it is the Bengals because Josh Allen is such a good improviser. The Bills do like to throw the deep ball. So if that is compromised, they still have, plenty of ways to move the ball down the field. Looking at the Bengals, they've had some bad luck because they retooled their offensive line in the offseason. And I think, by midseason, they had really come together and it was working well. And now they're missing 3 guys from the offensive line that had started together for most of the year. And now they have to, deal with that playing against the best team in the NFL. And it might be really windy. So it could be really tough for the Bengals. And that's why I think the market is mostly at Bills minus 5 because the Bengals offensive line is banged up. And as much of a challenge, as much of an uphill climb as that might be, Joe Burrow is pretty darn good. And if you wanted to find a situation where a team could overcome those losses on the offensive line and overcome the weather and the opponent, I think Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd and Hayden Hurst, those weapons, they're still capable of doing it. So just a really interesting matchup. And, we didn't get to really see that game get played a few weeks ago. So we get that matchup now, and it should be a really good one.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm most excited about that game. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, I tweeted this out like a couple weeks ago about how most places had the Bills as a Super Bowl favorite. You guys had the Chiefs. You guys still have the Chiefs as Super Bowl favorite. I'm seeing plus 85, plus 285 right now. I looked at some Square Sports Books, and they also have the Chiefs, but it's pretty close between them and the Bills. For you have the Bills at plus 345. So there's a little bit of a gap in there. Can you explain kind of your thinking behind that and what the market is telling you about that?
So for everyone on the outside, like all you see are the prices being offered by a given sports book. What you don't see are what the liabilities are for the sports book. And that is a significant factor in whatever prices are being offered. So we took a large bet on the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl well before the season started. So I've been managing to that position all season long. So I'm very intentionally offering a number on the Chiefs where I'm not asking for bets on them. What I'm trying to do is ask for bets on the other teams because of that position. So when you look at every price being offered right now for a team to win the Super Bowl, it's not like a pure number based on probability. Like I am managing to liabilities. Right. So
Okay.
All along, I've tried not to float a number on the Chiefs that was going to like attract a large bet because I'm trying to get bets on the other teams. So I think right now I'm probably highest in the market on the Bengals to win the Super Bowl. Like the numbers that I input for like roughly what I think their odds are of winning, and our position said, oh, okay, I think we can be higher than what I'm seeing at other places, and I'd be happy to take a bet of significant size at this current number that I'm offering. The thing that I'm always trying to do is, when I look at the combined implied probability of all the teams in the market, is have some like target theoretical hold percentage. And that's a calculation just based on the implied probability of all the selections added up. And in doing that, I'm trying to be, very competitive with my pricing. So you could say, oh, well, Circa has worse odds on the Chiefs, but look at the odds on the other teams. Look at the odds as a whole and like what is the combined implied probabilities of all those teams. Like we might not be the absolute best in the world, but I'm trying to be as competitive as I can, if not the best in the world, on what that number is to say like, we're offering the best prices overall. But yes, I'm trying not to have the best price on the Chiefs. And it's just so worked out that, they have gotten the bye and the number one seed in the AFC. And yes, that AFC championship might be played on a neutral field, but they're not going to have to win a road game to get to the Super Bowl. And if they get to the Super Bowl, they're probably going to be favored in that game. So, hasn't been a position that's like worked out favorably to this point for us because, the team that we took a big bet on has become the team that is the Super Bowl favorite. But yeah, if you just look at the path over the course of the season in their price, like you have to have the note that, well, we've had a liability on the Chiefs. That's what I'm managing to. It's not exactly a pure probability.
Right.
But if they play the Bills in the AFC Championship, like the Bills are probably favored just based on the power ratings.
Oh, okay. So that's interesting. I was going to ask you that next. But so just to be clear, what you're saying about the futures market for the Super Bowl is that it's not, you can't just take your market and say those are the exact probabilities when you work it all out. You are managing because you have this big bet on the Chiefs this preseason that it's impacting the market there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in any given like futures market, that's just going to happen where you have a certain team that you lose to, and there's always going to be, some set of the teams that you lose to and some set that you win to. But at certain points, it can be a number where you're like, okay, I just don't want to make this this negative number any bigger. So I'm going to have to, adjust my pricing accordingly and encourage action on the other teams to try to lessen that liability.
Absolutely. So let's suppose that Chiefs, Bills win and no significant injuries, and they're going to the neutral site in Atlanta to play the championship game. What would you open at for the spread?
Assuming nothing goofy happens.
Nothing goofy happens, yeah.
As far as final margin of victory to pregame point spread on this week's games, just feels like Bills minus 2.5, that they're going to want to take 3 and lay less than 3 on the Bills. We have that game in Kansas City that was already played this year as a reference point. And I do think that game and that closing number has a little bit of value because I don't think these teams are really all that fundamentally different since then. What have the Bills lost? I think Von Miller maybe since that time, but they're still, a very good team overall. And I don't, I do think that's pretty much a true neutral site in Atlanta. Yep. So it just feels like the Bills are the higher power rated team, and then they're going to be a small favorite.
Yeah, I would make Bills -1 based on my current numbers. Chris Bennett, thank you so much for your time and joining me on the podcast. Please let everyone know where they can find you on the internet and in real life.
So I do have a Twitter account. I use Twitter frequently. I don't tweet very often because I'm not looking to get into arguments with people on Twitter.
Wait, does that happen?
Does that happen on Twitter? I've heard.
Okay. It may be true. I don't know.
Yeah, my handle on Twitter is betchris. So
with
every
an
once
H.
in a while, I'll tweet out something that I think people might find interesting. And Twitter is a very valuable tool for me as far as getting information on everything that we're booking. I work at an office in the Golden Gate Casino in downtown Las Vegas, which is just across from Circa, the destination sports book that we love to see fill up on these weekends with football. I spend a lot of hours in that office, but I'm also, available for pretty much whatever if people are interested. So, give me a shout if I guess I can be useful in some way.
Awesome. Yeah, you are so useful in helping us break down these games. I appreciate your time, Chris. Thanks again. This is Ed Fang, your host for the Football Analytics Show. I'm honored that you listened all the way through with that interview with Chris Bennett. I thought he was an amazing guest. I really like talking with bookmakers and see how they think because Circa's line is obviously really sharp. It's something that I look at when I am trying to handicap games. I always want to know which side of the spread that they're going to be on. And it was just really fun talking to the man who makes that all happen. Just a reminder, you can get my free sports betting newsletter by going to thepowerrank.com. Even as football comes to an end, I will still be giving out a curated list of sports betting tips and news. Not necessarily football, but we'll get into college basketball. And after that's over, we'll get into other sports as well. Sign up at thepowerrank.com. Once again, my name is Ed Fang. Honored to be your host for the Football Analytics Show, and I'll talk to you again next week.